As Samantha said, I am a marketing and communications consultant. My background actually is as a classical pianist, but my career has always been in marketing the arts. I have worked in a number of disciplines for organizations across Canada and have been in Hong Kong for 3.5 years, where I continue to do the same type of work. So looking at the topic for this session, planning cycle for artistic and audience growth, I realized that it's really quite a complex topic because programming can't really exist by itself. Programming touches on every aspect of an organization, marketing certainly, but also finance and production, fundraising. Every aspect of what the company does is affected by the programming. Yet my experience, and I've been doing this for a number of years, with the programming process has been predominantly top-down. So my work has mostly been marketing the programming that has been presented to me by the artistic director. That's not to say that I wasn't consulted. Of course, I would be asked my opinion about this piece versus that piece, or this artist instead of that one, and how did I think they would perform at the box office. But for the most part, my time was spent waiting for that email to arrive from the artistic director with the spreadsheet about what I would have to sell, at which point then the marketing department would really kick in and we would start to get things in motion to sell that product. So the marketing people in the audience will certainly know what that means. The programming inevitably arrives late. You will have spent a lot of time at the doorstep of your artistic director saying, okay, this is your deadline, okay, this is your new deadline, and going back to your office and changing your plans, and then, really having to run when it does finally arrive for you. I suspect that this is a common approach, but is it the only one? So when I read the description for this session, former one-way programming practices being replaced by more collaborative processes, I thought, yippee! If there is something else out there and another way of doing this, I would really like to hear about it. And that's exactly what we will hear from our panelists. So in the time that I've spent with our panelists, I've had the pleasure of speaking to them and getting to know a little bit about their work. And Septime, you do have a different approach to programming, and I wonder if you would tell us about it, please.
The artistic planning process is a tough one. This photograph is metaphorical for the process. These are beautiful ballerinas with very sweaty backs. It's a lot of hard work to make something that looked this pretty. And the work, that work is a collaborative one, as Deborah says. And for my entire career as an artistic director, for 17 years in Washington, D.C., and for 6 years before that in Princeton, New Jersey, I've been working with teams, assembling a team, and working with a team very much in tandem all year long. That team includes myself and marketing, programming assistants, executive leadership, the marketing team, the production team, and the budgeting manager. And this team, for me, has been joined at the hip. And this is how I've thought and I've worked. It hasn't been a compromise from an artistic standpoint. To the contrary, it's been an exciting process where I can sort of bounce ideas off people's heads, et cetera. And at the end of the day, everyone owns the programming decisions more than if I send that email and spreadsheet and kind of let the marketing department go out there and begin to market. But it all starts with the artistic vision. And that is really about a few things that I always have in mind when implementing and imagining how this brighter artistic vision might be implemented in real programming. We don't program in a vacuum. I'm not the artist in an ivory tower whose thoughts are great and they kind of echo around and somehow get into that spreadsheet. In fact, to be successful, these artistic ideas need to have practical implementation. So we have a series of practical decisions that happen in process in a really systematized way. I also think the artistic vision for any institution needs to be a short elevator speech that everyone knows, that the Hong Kong Ballet will be viewed internationally as one of the most forward-looking of Asia's premier ballet companies with interesting and internationally significant programming, be vital to the cultural life of Hong Kong in ways that transcend the theater moment, but engage in the audience's lives in more deep and everyday kinds of ways. And at the center of that, really important theatrical moments that are transformative. And that the Hong Kong Ballet will nurture artists. Dancers begin with us at age 18 and retire at, say, 38. For 20 years, they're growing with us, and it's our responsibility to steward that career over a period of time. Those are the sort of considerations we bring into artistic planning. Some practical measures are a balanced diet. Not every show is going to describe everything about our artistic vision, but over the course of a season, we should describe who we are for an audience and take them on a journey. And timing is key. We artists need to be good partners to the marketing department to deliver a few easy successes in a season, maybe the opening not sweated out too much, and the closing end with a bang, and hide those hard, challenging shows to sell somewhere in the middle where they'll do less damage so we can recover before we go to the summer break. Some considerations. Do the audiences really care? Not if we don't if our work doesn't resonate with them. It's got to be pertinent to their everyday life. We are building community by building experiences for them, and I have found it's important to reach out to different constituencies in different ways, and we can almost segment our programming that we know that we want to reach out to young people in one way, to children and to youth slightly differently, to young professionals in a different way, to elderly in a different kind of way. Collectively, we're one thing, but we can be shaded differently with different constituencies. We've got to surprise people. There's a power in the curveball. There needs to be, when that season brochure shows up, some kind of surprise that one didn't expect to be there. This should say great is good's enemy. I also think that oftentimes we're risk averse because we want everything to be great, and so therefore everything has to be safe. And sometimes you just got to do it and put it out there. And if it wasn't great, the next show will be. You can take the day off, and you know it's another day in the life of ballet. So it's important to keep experimenting and not be too concerned that every show be really successful, but collectively that it all be really resonating. And really important case made for the big, hairy, audacious goal, that big, artistically transformative project that shows up once a year, maybe once every 18 months, certainly at least once every 2 years, developing some big project with the team collaboratively that every aspect of the institution can be part of and can feel as part of a success. Now onto the kind of the nuts and bolts that Deborah was talking about, the actual daily sort of how do we do it? How do we assemble this team? How does it actually work? As an artist, I know I work on deadline. I'm just not going to do it if the deadline isn't showing up. So we have to put into place a budgeting process that respects our institution's kind of financial cycle. And for me, what I've done in my past, and we're beginning to implement actually tomorrow, the first of these weekly meetings, we will begin here in Hong Kong, and I have for many years, assembled a weekly meeting of about an hour and a half where the marketing director, this group, this small kitchen cabinet assembles and does nothing but talk about future planning, about future repertoire, always touching on where we want to be in 3 years and making decisions working backwards for that 1 year. It's collaborative and constant focus group, constant mulling over what might work better from a sales perspective, but also to make a complete picture of what we might be telling our audience and what we might be engaging in. And always returning to our big vision and keeping ourselves on track, because when you get into the nitty-gritty budgeting, you kind of morph, and we can become vulnerable to mission drift. It's really important for the artistic leader always to return back to the big picture, because the budgetary constraints and the sales constraints and the next show is not selling well, that kind of daily crisis management can get in the way for a lot of people unless someone keeps bringing us back to what the general goal is. It's a never-ending cycle. It's beautiful. It's like a mirror inside a mirror inside a mirror. It just doesn't stop. And this is more or less my experience that I try to stick to by starting, sort of ending a season with 2 years out, a year out. So presenting to staff, and over the course of the summer, budgeting for a draft budget for the next year. By August or September, we have our first draft budget, and everyone is in shock because of how out of whack it is. And then over the course of months, we massage it into place and pass the budget. Our board passes the budget. We start to fill in all the blanks, and then announce the season. And then suddenly it's time to start again. This kind of cycle is ongoing, and I try to keep it to once a week, but in fact it ends up being 2 or 3 times a month, just because you have shows and things get in the way. But throughout it, I think the thing that has made the collaboration feel exciting is to encode the proceedings with a kind of grandeur. Our art form, and ballet is a grand art form, and it's a metaphorical one. When the curtain goes up, the audience sees their idealized self. What we do is present to the world a metaphorical world. We're a mirror, but we're like that mirror that makes you look thin. It's like we're the skinny mirror, and make the world look more beautiful somehow. And so our language is designed to ennoble, or to show the world what ennobling power can be present in the art. And so it's relatively easy to think big in that way and think noble. And I found that collaboratively together, it feels like you're not delivering a mandate when you send off that spreadsheet, but instead everyone then can be part of the success, feel ownership of it, but also we all take the blame when something doesn't sell as well as it does. As I said at the beginning, it's really great to be here in Hong Kong, and I look forward to seeing you all at our performances, and I will be at your shows and performances, and look forward to thinking big together. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm just going to sit right down. I was quite cozy there. I feel like this is more of a living room discussion among our peers and professionals. I'd just like to recap a little bit on the institution, on our National Kaohsiung Center for the Arts. We are not yet open, so we are still under construction. We were supposed to be open twice already. So that was shifting sands, I believe. So for the past 2 years, we have basically been shifting and reshuffling a lot of our plans. So, but this is temporary, I believe. When we open and when we get into routine operations, I believe it will be a bit more consistent to what we want in the cycle. But I really want to touch on what Septime just said, is the artistic vision. I think it's, well, first of all, let me give you an overall. You see the white square on the screen, that's our National Arts Center, National Kaohsiung Arts Center. We are situated in a very big park, and we do not have access to the space yet. So we are using, if you see on the lower bottom right corner, there are 4 bars. These are the converted spaces that we have to use right now, which is a far cry from what we have. Our stages are quite big. Our stages range from, actually not a big range. The Opera House is 2,200, Concert Hall 2,000, Playhouse is close to 1,300, and the smallest is Recital Hall, which is 470. And right now, the converted spaces that we have right now, the black box is 100 people. So it's very different programming what we do now and what we're going to do when we open. But we are the only national level art center in the South. So unlike our colleagues in Taipei, this is probably the biggest cultural investment in 30 years by the government. So we are built by the government. So we are charged with the mission to develop the entire southern region and to develop partnerships with local city governments and local arts venues to help grow the vision, the region, the artists, the markets as well. So I'm just gonna let the slides roll so you can get an idea of what it looks like. This is looking pretty good right now. We're close to finishing. But going back to the artistic vision, I want to touch on that is I think it's contrary to a lot of misconceptions that for marketing people, there's always this tension with programming people that sometimes I think, well, both sides, we cannot think about we're satisfying what the current market needs, or else we would all be doing musicals, Lion Kings, every week on. We really have to think about where do we want to take our audiences? How big a market do we want to develop? So for us, the most important thing is the artistic vision for us as well. Our marketing works quite close with the programming team. We get involved very early on when we are at the same table. It's more of a collaborative effort. When we're at the same table, we would pose questions. Why do you want this in the program? Why do you want this in the festival this year? Where are we going with this plate? Like Septime said, where are we going with this plate? How does it fit into our mission and goals? And we talk about it. And some of the things that if the team feels that, okay, this is not solid on our programming, on our artistic vision or where we want the center to be in the next 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 years, we would set that aside for another day or another project that would actually fit well with the mission. So it's more of a collaborative effort at Weiwuying. We believe that, I think all of us in the center, we believe that great art touches people, so everything has to be really good. So when you have really good art to work with, it's how do you convey that to the audience? How do you translate that for them? It's a total experience that they can see what you see. Of course, we're working in a new market, so there are many, many challenges. When I arrived 2 years ago, there was a lot of negative opinions about the centers. There were skepticism in a lot of communities. So with that, but that I think is workable. People are just generally friendly. So it's up to us to be able to communicate the center's artistic vision to our communities, to our, whether it be artists, the people that we work with, or donors, corporations, the governments, civil servants. We have a lot of stakeholders that we need to talk to, but the main core value is what we want to do and where do we want to go, and just pull people on board. That for us is very, very important. So for the process part, I would have to say, as we just mentioned, it's shifting grounds, shifting sands. For us, for example, we have a big brand festival, the Autumn Festival, which is called the Weiwuying Arts Festival, which is October to November. For us, we ideally wanted information at the end of this year, January, so we could do planning. It takes us about 8 months at least to do full strategy and programming. For this year, we did not get full information by June. So that's a challenge. And box office goes on sale. Initially, we wanted it to be in July so we could start promoting it during our Children's Arts Festival. But we did not get enough information in time to make that deadline. So every day is a deadline for us, basically. So we got information by June, and then we pushed back the ticketing sales at I think late August. But our festival starts in 27th of October this year. So that gave us a very, very short window to explore and expand the market. But it is what it is. We just deal with it, we work with it, and we pick out the big points that we want to communicate, and we shift our strategies also pertaining to our missions and what we want to communicate. And we go with it as long as it does not deviate from the long-term path that we want it to go. I'm just going to stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
So actually, surprisingly, Clockenflap's become a household name, which is both an absurd and a proud moment. It's much more than a music festival. And actually the arts is a lesser known facet of Clockenflap, and this is something that I've been really focused on for the last 4 years. So I'd like to share my artistic vision with you, which is basically to create from the ground up an accessible, inclusive and safe environment within which to present authentic, engaging and transformative arts. And that really comes as a response to a void which existed in Hong Kong, I believe, before Clockenflap was born. And really the vision at that moment was to create a platform for local and international artists across numerous genres of music and art within that kind of festival context. In terms of actual arts programming, I'm seeking those immersive, visceral, tactile experiences, really to engage with audiences. I think festivals have been a kind of sideshow, historically speaking, and there's a great opportunity to present everything from pure spectacle to the more contemplative works. Festivals are also a wonderful opportunity to bring people together, and I believe that art actually acts as a lubricant. Unlike gallery art, which is often entirely cut off from real life, festival art is really thrust into the audience domain. This presents both challenges and opportunities. Our arts program is themed each year, which is something that I've been implementing these last 3 years, basically searching for a kind of zeitgeist, a narrative that emerges via research, obviously seeing new work through the year, having conversations. Ultimately, I see the opportunity is to stimulate dialogue, and art can act as a catalyst to do that. So turning focus to this idea of planning cycles, it may come as a surprise or not that our planning cycle is actually incredibly fragmented. The reality is, even after 10 years and given the success and the scale of Clockenflap, we're still out there with our begging bowl year after year, trying to secure the venue. It's basically impossible, or at least it has been this far, to lock in venue dates sufficiently ahead of time. The ripple down effect of this is significant. It dramatically affects pretty much every aspect of the festival, and it's actually been the stuff of nightmares at times. So this creates a strange atmosphere of uncertainty. We've learned that in some cases, we simply need to take an enormous financial risk by committing to programming before we've actually got a venue 100% locked down. There was a year early on when we didn't do this. We hesitated, and as a result, the festival was reduced to basically 500 people. So for me, as the artistic director and the profile of the arts program, I think it's a bit easier because the kind of artists that I'm communicating with are more accessible. However, for Justin, who's our music director, the profile of the artists that he's communicating with and trying to bring to Clockenflap to present. Normally you'd need at least 18 months to 2 years to actually have those kind of conversations and to do a deal, essentially, to bring them to Hong Kong. So it's incredible that he can actually turn around a lineup. This year we've got Massive Attack and Prodigy, which is one of our biggest lineups yet. And I think Justin's been working on this for less than 8 months, which is quite incredible. So if I was to define our programming cycle, I'd say that it's very much been running on adrenaline these last 10 years, which is obviously not sustainable. There is a positive outcome, which is that we've had to become extremely collaborative. As you can imagine, with an event, the scale of Clockenflap and the complexity, there's a number of moving parts, everything from site planning, infrastructure, audience flow, power distribution, weather, and it's actually totally critical for each department to collaborate in order to deliver that world-class event. There is some good news, however, on the subject of venue booking, and that's that we're having conversations with West Kowloon at the moment to basically try and lock in a kind of multi-year deal. Role of the audience, audience development. So Clockenflap has basically grown from a single-day event to a 3-day event, and our audience has grown from 1,500 people in 2008 to 70,000 visits last year. We've had, it may come as a surprise, but we've had a kind of build it and they will come approach. In our first year, we did absolutely no market research whatsoever. We were simply satisfying a personal desire that we had to attend a music and arts festival in Hong Kong, and we felt that amongst our peers. In recent years, we've had to be more mindful of our expanding audience for obvious reasons. I'm still cautious about reliance on market research, certainly from an artistic director point of view. I think data can easily be skewed, misinterpreted, or lead you down the wrong path, and it has in the past. So our original strategy of build it and they will come still holds true. I'm focusing my efforts on presenting high quality arts and imagining these within this festival landscape. I'd say the role of marketing becomes one of storytelling, transmitting our arts program in a comprehensible and appealing way, which is collaborative. We have marketing meetings once a week and a kind of management meeting once a week to discuss the direction of the festival and make sure that everyone's aligned. We always refer back to that original vision to make sure that everything's kind of on track. What else? Last point really I'd like to say is that it is critical to stay connected to your audience and continue to be relevant, which involves obviously being out in the public domain, going to shows, exhibitions, talking to as many people as possible, keeping an eye out for that zeitgeist, finding those kind of emotional narratives which are relevant to people's lives, and then take that as inspiration. And also to be mindful of the audience journey, which begins with their first contact with your brand and perhaps only ends if they actually completely lose interest or you become irrelevant. So on the practical side, taking care of the audience is important, and trying to anticipate how they will interact with each work of art from start to finish. It's in those little details that we need to pay attention to. Yep. Thank you.
Listening to the variety of approaches here and actually thinking about a lot of the things that I've heard here at the summit in the last couple of days just made me think about an experience I had at the National Arts Centre Orchestra in Ottawa, Canada, that kind of flips this idea of artistic programming coming first, although we've heard about it being collaborative. But in this particular case, there was a situation where from the top of the National Arts Centre, there was a decision that we really needed to attract a new and younger audience to the orchestra. Yes, that is a problem in North American orchestras. And we really needed to do something to attract the 25 to 49-year-olds. So there was a strategic decision to focus on, okay, what is it going to take to get that audience in? And there followed 2 solid years of research. I mean, psychographic, demographic, focus groups, surveys, you name it, deep analysis of our big database. And what emerged from all of that was, in this case, not so much a question of whether it was Beethoven or Shostakovich. What it really came down to was that people really wanted the experience. They wanted their concert going to be a social experience and to be comfortable. And so we ended up taking existing programming and kind of pulling it out and identifying it for this 3-concert series. And then we completely changed the way we were presenting it. So we turned the regular concert-going experience upside down. So we made the concert much earlier, starting at 7 o'clock instead of the usual 8. Doors opened at 5:30. People arrived and were greeted with a glass of wine. There were live food stations around the lobby. For small amounts of money, they could get very nice small plates. The musicians came out and mingled with the audience beforehand. On the stage, there were cameras and monitors, close-ups of the musicians. There was an on-stage host. It was a short program. We chose performers that were younger and kind of thematic programming. All of this added up to fully 40% of the audience being brand new to the orchestra. And we were able to track that because we had the data and the box office data to analyze. So it really was a situation that was absolutely not driven by programming, but driven by audience development and audience growth. So that was a really interesting, but in that particular case, successful way of going about it. Some people here in Hong Kong may be salivating over the idea of having control over your venue and a willingness to invest in that kind of research. And we talked about big data yesterday and how that can drive. But in this case, it has had long-lasting effects for that orchestra. So there have been lots of things that have come up. I would like to talk a little bit more about the idea of artistic vision and how that fits in to programming and audience growth. You have all mentioned a collaborative approach to this, but is there any risk in that collaborative approach to compromising your artistic vision for the company? Septime?
Yes, there is a risk. It's important that you collaborate, but it's also important that you're a little sneaky about it and sophisticated about how you use information. So that it's good to know how much this show did over that show, and information is power, but the way you use it might shift. As you said just a moment ago, we'd all be doing Lion King if that was our only bottom line role, Lion King the ballet over and over, or Nutcracker all year long. But so it's that balance of you finding out all the information, figuring out, but then collectively agreeing that this path is not this easy path is not the right path because it's not consistent with where we want to be in 3 years, where we want to be in 5 years. And what I found is when I have that kind of challenging program, which I feel is really important for the program, it might be the things around it that become a lot more accessible. For example, you mentioned the program in Ottawa that you just described for young audiences. Early on in my tenure in Washington Ballet, I had a program that was actually rather obscure. And I thought it would appeal to young people, and we developed a program called Beer and Ballet. And it was a series of open rehearsals with beer. We had, I think, the only official brewery like the Washington Ballet had the only official brewery of any ballet company in America. And that, and this one-off beer and ballet sold out within the first, 2 days, and that became a monthly occurrence for 15 years, because it was just a new thing. It was a context. There's something scary, sort of, something that our marketing department didn't like. I packaged it in this festive kind of networking environment, and it became something completely different, something much more accessible, and actually something really exciting, and changed our profile in some way.
So how much should we, or is it maybe safe to let the big data and audience feedback drive the programming? Jay, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think there is a risk. One year we programmed Jem. I don't know if you know Jem. She's a local canto pop star. Very high quality, very credible. And marketing they were keen to present her, and they thought that was a good idea based on the fact that she sells out the Kaohsiung for like 2 or 3 nights running, right? Justin, our music director, values her as a credible artist, so it made sense from his perspective. But what we didn't anticipate was the fact that the kind of audience that goes to the Kaohsiung for a Jem concert, they want 3 hours of non-stop Jem, right? And what we offered was 45 minutes of Jem in a kind of festival setting. So we got it wrong, basically. We thought that her fans would come to Clock and Flap and would be excited to see, their favorite star alongside, international performers. But in actual fact, not the exact opposite, but, the opposite was true. In fact, they would much rather see her in that context. So I guess, so in that particular instance, you've got to be careful of just looking at quantitative data. Right.
And so where does venue fit in, and does it, in terms of audience development and potential for audience growth? Kathy, you don't have a permanent stage yet, and so, how can you work around that, and what are your thoughts around whether venue contributes to an audience experience and whether they will come back?
Like I said, it's whatever we do right now is probably things that we won't be doing when we open, because the sheer scale is completely different. So for us, it's about experience. User experience is very important. In Kaohsiung, it's public transportation infrastructure is not that great. So people come, they drive themselves here. They expect that they can spend a half a day here. So what do we provide them other than that 70 minutes performance? That becomes really important. So in some of the photos, it shows that during our festivals, we convert the entire park areas that we use into grounds that you can come for a leisurely stroll, get some food, you go into a performance. But for us, I think everything fits into what we want for the audience to take away. It needs for them to feel as if it's a journey along the way with us. So whether it be in the black box, whether it be in the outdoor spaces, what are the different experiences that we want to bring them is very important in our discussions. So I would say that once we move into the big building, that would be completely different. The only same mindset is how do we create a good experience and how do we take them on a journey, because when we say, I have to say, in Taiwan, a lot of our arts colleagues say that, performing arts, it should be a lifestyle for our people, for our citizens. I have to say, for a lot of citizens, it will never be a lifestyle, never ever be a lifestyle. For people who does not have the means to travel so far, if they don't have enough household income for them to be spending on leisure activities, it will never be a lifestyle. So what we really want to encourage is a journey that they come each time whether it be just for a stroll, watching an outdoor circus performance or indoors. It is something different that they can take away every time that they come. If they don't like it, we love it when they hate our performances, because then we want to know, why don't you like about the performances? And within that constant dialogue, it actually brings you closer to our audiences.
Before I open the floor for questions, I just want to put the question out in relation to programming and audiences. Organizationally, where does the buck stop? You know, there's always the adage that if a performance does really well and it sells out, oh, it's brilliant programming. But if it doesn't do so well, it's marketing. So, you know, and we all know
That's true.
that it...
I'm just kidding, Nick. I'm just kidding.
So, you know, I think we all know that it isn't entirely, but how do we really, as an organization, embrace the fact that, you know, we really are in it for together? Jay, do you have anything to...
I guess if the organization is not collaborative and people are working in isolation, then you could hold someone accountable, right, for a failure of a performance. But I think in most cases we would strive, certainly what we've discussed today and shared, you know, it's all about collaboration. There is always that chance of human error. Someone could forget to do something, or maybe put the wrong date on a poster. That happened to us about 5 years ago, which was my fault. So I think human error plays a part, but I think ultimately we're talking about collaboration, teamwork. So how could it can't possibly be one person or one department. It's if the project fails, it's the team has failed, you know.
I want to add to that. I think for us, well, we don't have market research yet. We don't have the budget for that. It's very costly right now, although we're national level. We're working on very tight budgets. So we use common sense, basically. So we come in discussion, I believe it was 2 years ago, about last year's festival. And there's a lot of communication that goes on in organizations, especially with the marketing and the programming. So it's the programming team needs to sell it to the marketing team first. But of course, the marketing team has to do their homework. And you have to be as much informed as well with your own research. So we were trying to, the programming team were trying to sell us about this festival being targeted to young audiences like we touched on this morning. And initial idea was very, very segmented and very stereotypical genres, traditional opera, orchestra, big performances that people that has so many seats to fill because we're hiring other venues in the city. But the mentality is targeting young people. And we were saying, no, we don't think that's targeting young people. Like, what factors do you think that has that relevance to younger people these days? And I think that got us talking about the whole idea and concept of the festival. So after that, both sides, both departments went back and we sort of did our homework and we brought some new options to the table. And it actually worked quite well because of that dialogue that we had very, very early on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the collaboration, if we're planning together, then we all take the glory when it's successful, or we all take the blame. And in a ballet company, unlike a producing company, where the artists are selected and brought in for a short period of time, we're creating the art together. There are 50 dancers who are with the company between 1 and 20 years, and a lot of them longer than the staff. So it really has a family feel. Theater company that produces large, usually will hire different actors for different shows. We function in such a different way. So there's an environment where it's a family in ways that other arts organizations aren't quite as deep into each other's lives, because we're with each other for such a long period of time. And I think that creates an environment that fosters collaboration in some good way.
Great. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience? Okay.
Can I add
sure.
a bit?
Yeah.
I think I missed something about our operations, just to give everybody an idea. I'm not sure how many organizations work like that, but I believe Deborah and I talked about how we do have a small committee about we coined it the International Affairs Committee, but basically it's a small chunk of people. Maybe I think it started with 4, and then it grew to now it's I think 6, because different people are involved in different projects. So it's basically the artistic director, the head of programming, the head of marketing, our international partnerships colleague who is stationed in Europe. We get together every 2 weeks, Skype meetings, and talk about the events that we went to, the international events like this that we went to, and the people that we meet, what is going on with our international colleagues, and what is going on with our local scene as well. And I think in time that really helped a lot, because that's more in tune about the vision and the missions and the goals that we want to achieve, the short-term goals, long-term goals. I think that is, for us, it works really well, that we bring in information from where we've been and our international colleagues back into this core team, so that we could adjust or we could expand on partnerships as well.
I'd like to ask about your thoughts around the difference between audience growth and audience development. Like what do we really mean? Are they different? Are they the same? And does it just mean getting more bums in seats? Is that really what it's all about? Or is audience development more about bringing them along on a journey?
I think that they are different things, and getting bums in seats is really important, but also over time curating experiences for a community that are relevant to the lives of the community, and ensuring that the art that's produced reflects the lives of the members of the community in ways that surprise themselves is really important. That's audience development, and also preparing them for new ideas. Many people think of ballet as a world of swans and lakes and princes and princesses, and in fact, ballet is a language that, just like any language that can be used in a classical manner or in a very contemporary way, ballet can be used to express these things of today, and getting audiences to be not afraid by giving them experiences over the course of a couple of seasons that lead to something quite forward-looking. They might not think they're ready for, but at the end of this process of seeing these kinds of work, they might be ready for. I think that process of education is development.
I guess audience growth has kind of economic overtones, whereas audience development is more qualitative, right? And it's I guess from our perspective, we've some of our audiences have been to Clockenflap since they were babies, which wasn't really planned. It's just that it was always a family-friendly event, and people would bring their kids. So there are kids coming to Clockenflap now that might be 10, 11, 12 years old, and they've only really known Clockenflap, which is kind of worrying for them and their future. But but it's nice to have seen those kids kind of grow up, and for them to have an understanding of what Clockenflap means, and for the festival to be expanding, and we hope the quality is there as well. And yeah, obviously they're going to be coming back in their teenage years and hopefully in their kind of young adult years. So maybe that's a slightly different perspective, but it's a very immediate example of audience development.
Yeah, I think it's also a matter of, not always feeding them the same thing, like not always giving them Beethoven and Schubert and Schumann, but introducing other other composers and maybe something a little more contemporary and different kinds of instrumentation and so on, and doing it in a way that makes them feel like, wow, I've been missing this all my life, and so glad to finally see this and have this experience, and being able to shape their journey through a series of performances with a particular organization, because that's really the only way that a repertoire can grow, or that programming can expand. Otherwise, you're really kind of stuck. Do we have any questions yet? Okay, then I thank you all very much for your attention. I hope that we've given you some ideas regarding this. I think it's clear that there is no one way of programming and that process. It's going to be different for different organizations, but hopefully you've come away with some things to think about that might apply to yours. And thank you very much, and thank you, panelists.